So, Lord, we come to you, first of all, with praise for, for your beauty and wonder and your goodness and all the words aren't adequate to talk about you. But Lord, just let it be said that there is no one like you, that there is nothing more powerful, more wonderful, more exciting than you, Lord. So I pray today that you would communicate with us somehow. Lord, I just say, talk with us, share with us, let us know what it is you want us to talk about, and then give us the exact application for each of us. And I pray that you will guide us. In Jesus' name, amen. I have not had the most peaceful time in my life over the last few months. And I won't go into details, but there's been a lot going on, and then some things that I don't understand. But I've just been feeling different. I've been feeling like there's been pressure, like there's been uncertainty about nothing in particular, many things. And again, I won't try to define it or interpret it. I'll just say that I'm struggling in some ways emotionally with what's going on in my life, because I like to be happy and, bouncing around all the time and in having enjoyable conversations with people. But sometimes I feel like just kind of pulling back and not even doing that. So I'm just being honest with you. And in that struggle, I have made a very, very conscious effort to not let it push me further away from my relationship with the Lord. I think if there's any fear I have in my life, it would be to get cold, to lose the fire that I have, my love for the Lord, my desire to get closer to him, and then to share with others that experience. And again, this honesty is not easy, because it's kind of hard to explain some of these things, because they're not really like, oh, well, this happened in my life, and as a result, boom, I've been struggling ever since. No, it's like, it's unexplainable at this moment. And so my tendency would have been to, well, let's figure this out. Let's get to the bottom of it, and then it'll all be better, right? Because I'm a fixer. I like to just nail the problem, understand it, and then do what it takes to get done with it. And you know me, I've been preaching for a while on sometimes we have to go through things. In other words, a difficulty in life, a problem, a trial, whatever you want to call it, is not always what should trigger us to then try to escape it. I know I've said this several times to you guys, and so now when I get a chance to respond in my life to this, I feel like, well, I need to take my own advice. I need to not run. I need to not do things to try to just get out of it, to try to make it all better, but to just let the Lord work through this in my life, and then stay in close communication with him, and then let him teach me what it is he's trying to teach me. I hope this makes sense so far, because even though the issue isn't clear, the struggle you can relate to, because for your own reasons, you have struggles, right? We all do. We all go through times in our lives. Some are well explained, some are just things that happen, and we don't understand it all. So I've been doing that, and then I've been talking with the Lord. I've been saying, I don't want to lose this closeness with you. I don't want to do stupid things. I don't want to be rude to people. I don't want to neglect my calling and my duty, and I don't want to. I just don't want to mess up, right? And so, on the other hand, I've just been saying, okay, I trust you. You're showing me something, and I'm not going to run away from it. I'm just going to stay here and let you show me. So last night, I'm sleeping, and I got this really vivid dream, which is really short and sweet. So there's not going to be, this wild interpretation kind of stuff. But I was sitting across a low table, maybe a coffee table, from a young man, an African-American man dressed in all red with a ball cap and dreads and tattoos, so here we are. I'm just kind of doing my thing. He's doing his thing. And then all of a sudden, he looks up at me and I'm looking at him, and he gets up and comes over to me and then puts his hand on my head and then just starts praying. And in real life, I've never experienced this, so I'm not going to say, okay, well, this is quite normal. But it was a major flash of light and a kind of an electrified feeling while he prayed. And that's all I remember of the dream. And so the only thing that I have to give you about that is that I know it's from God. I know he is assuring me, number one, and I can kind of stretch a little bit in my interpretations and say, people are praying for me. I'm not alone. Sometimes I feel alone. And that can lead to loneliness, by the way. Whether you're in a big family or maybe you are alone, but that aloneness is never excludes God or includes that aloneness. It certainly means that you've just forgotten that God is with you. And so what I'm trying to communicate here is that God sometimes knows what you're feeling, and he knows what you're struggling with. And so sometimes it's just a simple message of, and it might even be an angel in your dream. It might even be an angel in person. The point I'm trying to get across is that he wants you to know that you are loved. He wants you to know that his power is still alive. And even if you feel kind of on the outside of things, looking in, or just a little bit out of sorts, he wants to remind you that that doesn't change anything with him. All right. So what's that have to do with anything? I don't know. I just thought I'd tell you. Because it feels funny to me that you guys, I'm really honored that you would tune in to listen, first of all. And I know that God shows up, God gives us a word, God gives us what we need. And so there are times, though, when I feel like I'm an unworthy vessel. I'm not that kind of person who is, let's just say, ready to be a teacher, ready to be a preacher, ready to be anything. Yet God does it in spite of my unreadiness. Okay, so I want you to get that picture. I want you to get that sense that if you ever struggle with that, ever get into that place where you whatever is going on in your life, you go, wow, man, how can God use me? Or I'm not doing well enough for God to use me. And you start getting judgmental on yourself. I'm just going to say it. Don't do that. Let that door stay open 24/7, because you never know when he's going to walk in and out of it, right? He's going to come in and he's going to say, look, I'm not looking for your performance. I've just asked that you be available. And we've talked recently about what that might look like, because even our attempts to tell stories about people in the Bible, remember, I've said it They weren't sitting there praying for God to use them. They were not. David wasn't, as a kid, as being a shepherd, he wasn't saying, I'm going to be king. Abraham wasn't saying, God's going to send me to another country and make a nation out of my offspring. Noah, when he was young, didn't say, God's going to use me to save my family so we can repopulate the earth because God's going to destroy it. We never start off in those places. And so to expect yourself to be ready for them, isn't that kind of unreasonable? Because you don't know what he's going to ask you to do. Those folks didn't. It was always a surprise. And then last week we talked about, or maybe it was a week before, we talked about Mary, Elizabeth, Zechariah, the folks in the Christmas story that were they were just living their lives. And what happens is an angel shows up and tells them what's going to happen. So in almost every instance I can think of in the Bible, God's plan gets revealed not because those people were getting ready for it. Okay, so why would it be different for us? Why would it be different? Like, oh, well, I'll do this when, once I've attained this situation in my life, once I get myself cleaned up. I mean, I hear it all the time, working in drug and alcohol rehab, the guys a lot of times don't believe anything's possible until they have crossed a line of getting cleaned up. And in some cases, their lives have been filled with so much negativity, they never can cross the line because they're always going to be down on themselves. They're always going to be judging their own performance. All right, so I want this to be clear here. Another great example, and I want to read a little bit from Acts this morning. I think it's going to fit what we're talking about. But remember Peter. Peter was the disciple that he had a brother. I think it was Peter and James were the sons of thunder, the boisterous ones, the guys who were full of bluster and I'm going to change the world. I'm going to, I'm the greatest. And yet Peter was the one who most visibly failed the Lord, other than Judas Iscariot himself. Peter was the one who said, I'll never deny you, Lord. And yet Jesus told him he was going to 3 times. And then when that happened in his life, Peter had probably the lowest time because he loved his Lord. He had to struggle through that bad feeling of failure, and not just a routine failure. He didn't just forget to pay for his meal at the restaurant or lie to somebody, but he denied his beloved Lord. And all I can say is that when we fail God, we get a chance to then come back and sit in his presence. And I don't mean, if you want to put on the attitude of putting ashes on your head and sit and wearing burlap bags and sit in a pile of ashes for days, mourning, that's your choice. But God is looking for that sort of response in our hearts, that humble response of, I am not worthy. And so we walk a fine line as believers, because I don't believe in pep talks and saying, come on, you can do it. You can do this. You're worthy of God's love. You're worthy of him saving you. You're worthy of being used by him. And I would say, if you read what Paul writes, he would say none of us is worthy. I mean, let's just go that route for a minute. That we're all like filthy rags. Everything we've done, ever tried to do for the Lord is like stinking rags. And so how do you reconcile then being ready to be used by God? So all I can say is that I've said it enough with all of us, is that when Christ looks at us, he looks at us not as filthy rags. That's how Peter was describing how he looks at himself, as unworthy. Yet, of all the people, he was used so greatly. So going back to Peter, he had to go through this struggle too, of I have failed my Lord, and I could quit right now. I could just go wallow for the rest of my life. Like some people will say, okay, well, I've made the mistake of my life, and now I'm not worthy to go on. So they can either decide that they're going to become a hermit and stay out of ministry. They could actually want to end their lives. There's all kinds of ways to respond to this. But what I'm trying to get at is, when you're struggling, sit in the presence of the Lord. Let him look at you. Let him shine his light on you. Let him remind you that you belong to him. Let him remind you that you are forgiven. Okay? Forgiven simply reminds you of your status with him. It's never going to be condemned. You're never condemned once again. If you are in his family, you're always in right position with him. So don't let your struggles make you think you've disqualified yourself. Chapter 2, verse 1 of Acts. The day of Pentecost had arrived. They were all together in one place. Suddenly, a sound like that of a violent rushing wind came from heaven, and it filled the whole house they were staying in. They saw tongues like flames of fire that separated and rested on each of them. Then they were all filled with the Holy Spirit and began to speak in different tongues as the Spirit enabled them. So we'll pause there. So they're in the upper room because it's the day of Pentecost, and they get together on the day of Pentecost. And then they were together in one place, which is important. And the sound of violent rushing wind, it didn't say a rushing wind, it says the sound of a rushing wind. So it's kind of a roar noise, fills this room. And the writer says it came from heaven and filled the whole house they were staying. And they saw tongues like flames of fire. That's just little, I guess, tongue-shaped flames that came in and separated, and each one of them received a dose of this. Then they were all filled with the Holy Spirit and began to speak in different tongues as the Spirit enabled them. And by the way, this is after Jesus had ascended back to heaven. So he told them to go wait. Remember, before his final words, before he went back to heaven, were to go wait for the Comforter to come. So this is the arrival of the Comforter. So when Jesus said to go wait, this is exactly what he wanted them to wait for. Now, before we get into the rest of this, I'm going to say that these are the guys who, for 40 days, saw Jesus on and off after he had been crucified and risen again. And I'm going to get this. I'm just going to take a liberty in this story and say they probably felt like they reconciled with him, because in essence, they all failed him. They all ran away and hid. Peter denied Jesus before, as he was going to be put to death the next morning. And the rest of them just hid away and failed to believe that he said, I'm going to die, but I'm going to come again. I'm going to rise again. And so they were afraid for their own lives and went and locked the door and hid away. So they also had some issues in their own lives that they had to reconcile with the Lord. So for 40 days, they got this great benefit of hanging out with him, letting him show them the wounds, and let them also reconcile back to him, let them come back to him and feel okay. Because, man, wouldn't it have been crazy if he had died, risen again, and then just gone to heaven, and then they would have been left with their own guilt to deal with on their own. But they got this opportunity to hang with him. And I think this is why I say, hang out with him when you're feeling this way. Because I think then he can get you ready to be in where you're supposed to be. Go get together and wait for the comforter to come, because not because, oh, because I want you to feel good, but because I have a job for you. You get what's going on here, right? So the difficulties lead to our choice whether to move in closer to the Lord or to let it cause us to drift off. If we say, no, I'm going to stay in his presence, then what happens is we start to hear instruction. If you hear instruction and you go, yes, that's me, I'm going to do what he says to do, and you obey, then you get equipped, right? Now, it doesn't always happen. I mean, you're not going to be sitting in a room and speak Egyptian. You know what I mean? It's not that we're going to do exactly what happens here. It's going to happen in God's way with us in our lives for his purpose that he has for us. Okay? And that might look completely different. But the beginning process is still the same. It's still that no matter what we've been through, no matter how many failings we've had with the Lord, if our desire is to go sit with him, let him teach us, then he is going to equip us. I guarantee it. That's what's shown all the way through the Bible. All these stories that we read and the ones we will never get to are about God bringing people into position to do what he asks them to do. It hates that you can't just be a nice religious person and leave everybody else alone. It hates that. That's what Satan hates. And he's going to try to get us to stay out of this preparation phase. He's going to talk to us and remind us of all the things that we've done that disqualify us. Okay? That make you feel like an unworthy or a weak person, right? And I would love to have those experiences where Gabriel shows up and says, you know, with all his glowing beauty, and freaks me out in such a way that I fall to the ground and can't look at him. I would love to have that experience. But at the same time, I don't need it. And I don't think you do either. We already understand that this has happened already. This is the same God. And even though he doesn't give us such a dramatic delivery of his message, he still delivers it. When you get closer to him, you start developing this love relationship with him. When you love someone, you want to find out all you can about them. When you love someone, you want your desires to be more like theirs, right? So if his desire for me is to be a certain way, then I want to be that way. I want to be more like that. And so this does circle back to where we first started, and that includes those times where we're just out of sorts. We're not clicking on all cylinders. I don't care how you how you describe it, things just don't feel like they're in sync in your life. The stuff is happening and you're going, man, this is out of control. I don't like the feeling. Do not, and I can just say it, don't let that deter you from God. Let that be when the light switch goes on and the light goes on, and it's when you need to go closer to God. And you can start to have David-like conversations with him. Like, even though you feel far away, I know you are right here with me. Even though my circumstances are such that my enemies are trying to kill me, I know that eventually you will exalt me. You'll put me back where I'm supposed to be, and you will punish those who are doing evil. So talk to him real and just say, even though I'm having these bad feelings, Lord, I'm trusting you. Even though things are going in such a way in my life where, man, I wish this was over. I wish this would change into that, and so on and so forth. I'm not going to spend my waking hours trying to fix it. Your job, my job, is to get close enough to him for his thoughts to start to become our thoughts, for our minds to transform. Romans 12, 1 and 2, transform into being more like him, thinking more like him, which is holy and pleasing to him, worshiping him. Don't be conformed to this age. In other words, all those things you're doing that are trying to be like other people, that are trying to please other people, to please yourself as a result of people going, yeah, way to go. Nice job. This is great. You're doing great. Or accomplishing something in such a way that you feel good about yourself. That's conforming to the world. That's letting your flesh run your life. It's the opposite of giving yourself as a living sacrifice. So don't be conformed, but be transformed. Okay? This is not washed up, clean, scrubbed down. Transformed is you were once this, you are now this. But it's not taking one thing and just polishing it up and making sure it shines nice. It is actually a total change out. All right. So be transformed. How? We're back to this thought thing, renewing your mind. How do you renew your mind? We just talked about it. By hanging out with the mind changer, hanging out with the one who has the perfect mind, learning his perfection in the book, trusting him by telling him the truth about you and how you feel about things, and letting him transform your thinking. This is why he bragged on David. Be transformed by renewing your mind, comma, and I know this is loaded, but I gotta keep with this till the end of verse 2. So renewing your mind. So as a result of renewing your mind, so you may what? Discern. That's back to using this, isn't it? And your spirit kind of like combined to discern or understand the difference between what is good, pleasing, and perfect will of God. So now about our specifics, the things that we can't actually go to the scripture and say, should I move here? Should I take this job? Should I put my kids in this school? Should I do this or do that? All the things we might struggle with, we need to get closer to God and not try to tell him what to do, not try to figure it out and get him to change his mind about that. We need to get close to him in such a way that his thoughts start to become our thoughts. Okay, this takes patience. It takes dedication. It takes living sacrifice. And so you say, well, I've done that. I gave God my all, but I keep struggling. I keep sliding back into my own desires and my own life plans and so on and so forth. Don't worry about that. Can I just say that? Don't let that stop you. I can't tell you how many times I've taken over my own body, my own mind, my own spirit, and said, no, it's mine. And then tried to run backwards with it. I can't tell you, I can't count so many thousands of times that I should be living in shame if I didn't believe Romans 12:1 and 2, that my mind is still being transformed. No matter how many failures I have, I am still being transformed. My mind is getting renewed. So that doesn't mean that my flesh all of a sudden becomes so weak that it doesn't have effect on me anymore. Okay? I'll go back to a good friend of mine who recently, a couple years ago, passed away. He was in his late 80s. And I would just go sit with him maybe once every week or every couple of weeks and just kind of chit chat. And he would say to me, he'd say, Merlin, he says, I realize I'm really close to heaven's gates. So he had no doubts about being saved, had no doubts of being in the arms of Jesus, yet he struggled with his own humanity still. He said, I still struggle even with dark thoughts. I still struggle with ideas that I know I'm not supposed to have. And so I won't get into great detail, but revealing the true nature. This is a man who was a pastor, started this worldwide ministry, has done, the accomplishments are a mountain, if I were to think about it. And you would say, well, that kind of person has nothing to worry about, right? Yet the flesh was nagging him up until the end. So I'm going to say, don't let that throw you off. Don't let that get the better of you. Satan's going to want to get in your ear and say, you get disqualified because of what you're recently doing, recently thinking, recently wanting. I mean, the list, the list. We all have our own list. Yet I'm going to say that those people in that upper room weren't trying to purify themselves. They weren't trying to become better people. They were just obeying what Jesus said to do and waiting for their purpose to be revealed. Do you want that? Because if you do, that is the method. Give your bodies a living sacrifice because it's pleasing to God. Let him change you by renewing your mind. Then you will know. Not you might learn what the will of God is, so that you may discern. That means you all of a sudden can know what is the good, pleasing, and perfect will of God. So the reason I talk about God's will, I end up talking about that a lot, is because it's the most frequently asked question by people of religious leaders. How do I know God's will for my life? And they're not typically answered by this. And so I'll take this and I'll say, okay, Jesus said, knock, seek, and ask, which is all that's doing is revealing your what? Desire. Revealing your heart. If you're in love with somebody, you're going to be knocking on their door. If you are adoring of what they've done for you, and you feel like you want to be part of their life, you're not going to leave them alone. You're going to bug them until they either kick you out, reject you, or take you in. In this case, Jesus says the door will be opened to you. So that's why I talk about the will of God, because I realize that it's one of our primary struggles. No matter how mature we get, no matter how much we know, we still struggle because we forget that this sacrifice must be done, and not just once. It's a ongoing, continual thing.